So this time around, we're going to be going off into the second singularity, which is Septem. This was written by Sakurai. For all the people who were enjoying the Fate Lost Einherjar video, this is a crazy term because it's written by the same person. However, her drafts got thrown out. This wasn't her original Nero story. She also wrote on Extella, parts of LB5, LB2. She's the one that did Shamosa, the London chapter, parts of Camelot, and prototype fragments. We start this one off with Mash telling Ritsuka that she had a dream. You know, when the master and the servant are linked, usually if a servant sees a dream, then the master will see the dream also. We've seen that in cases like Shiro and Saber, or even Ren and Archer. In this case, she's asking him did he see the dream as well, and he tells her no. To that, she decides not to press the issue on it and go ahead and lead into the briefing. We get up to Roman and he tells us that this time we're going to be heading off into 1st century Europe, that being ancient Rome. Immediately you have Mash asking him for some advice. She's trying to figure out how she can determine whether or not a servant is an enemy the moment that we meet him, and Roman has to break it down to her that it's out of his scope, and he can already tell the reason why she's saying this is because she wants to minimize the amount of engagements as much as possible. Going back into what she was saying in the last singularity, she wants to avoid any unnecessary conflict. She doesn't want to fight anybody or harm anybody if she doesn't have to. At the very least, he tells her that he'll just keep his eye out if he has any bad gut feelings. We get over to the singularity and Mash admits that she's happy that we made it over in one piece without getting attacked the moment that we got there. She says that while being out in the field can be a frightening experience, being able to leave Chaldea alone and not be cramped up in the facility all the time, that alone is enough motivation for her to continue these battles. Right now, Nero Claudius, who is the 5th emperor of Rome, is the one that's supposed to be in charge, and we find out that we came in on a time where her mother was recently poisoned fatally. In the Fate version, Nero was the one who did this, and it turns out that she didn't make it, though Roman assures us that Nero hasn't yet reached his state of decline. And again, there also wasn't supposed to be any huge wars going on. Right after that, we see Nero taking on a bunch of forces with her people. We can't sense any magical energy coming from her whatsoever, so we come to the conclusion that she must be a human from this era. The same way Saber Jill was a human in Orleans. She's still alive. She asked us where we're from, and we try to tell her that we're from the future, and she immediately assumes that we have mental illness. How ironic. In the middle of that conversation, a berserker that's filled with rage just starts chanting and yelling at Nero out of nowhere, claiming that she's his niece. Nero confirms this by saying it is her uncle Caligula, who was the 3rd emperor of Rome. He ended up going down by assassination. He continues to make attempts to try to attack Nero and try to talk to her, but since he's in the berserker class, we can't make out anything that he's saying. After we beat him, we end up driving him off. He goes into spirit form and he just leaves the scene. That goes for the forces that he brought along with him too. Even though she is human, Nero admits that she's familiar with magecraft. She's one of the only people who wasn't surprised when she started to hear Roman talking. Everybody being in shock that Nero is actually a female instead of a male. We get into the city and you have Nero discussing the background of the chapter, Septem, which refers to Septem Montes, the 7 hills that Rome was founded upon when it first started. By this point in time, it is the greatest empire to ever exist, and she says that ruling Rome is equivalent to ruling the entire world. It's just that impactful. She then explains that she has been running into some problems recently. Although we did bring up that there wasn't supposed to be any conflicts right now, she says that a new enemy has formed, that being the United Roman Empire, which she tells us is an alliance of emperors, Caligula being one of those emperors. They've been attacking her and her people, they've been subjugating parts of her territories, and worst of all, she has no idea where they came from or who's behind them. They've already taken half her empire, and every time she tries to send out scouts to get information, they never end up making it back. She also had an unnamed court magus that was eliminated by Caligula. This begs the question from Roman, well, how is Caligula even still around? Again, this takes place in the year 60 AD. Caligula was assassinated in the year 41 AD, so he's already been summoned back to Rome just 19 years after leaving. She claims that her mage was a master of spells that overcame death, that is until he met Caligula, and then Caligula sworded him through the chest. So much for being immortal. And this shocks Roman because beating a mage this close to the age of gods shouldn't be that easy, which lets him know that Caligula is a servant and he must be extremely powerful. So considering that she's now down on troops, Ritsuka opts to be her viceroy and figure out exactly what's going on. So we go through several battles, Roman mentioning that he can't wait until this is over so he can check his favorite blog. And Ritsuka has to call him out on this, like, wait a minute, isn't the world destroyed? So how are you checking a blog? If the world is gone, who's updating this blog? And Roman comes out the bag, you got me. It's AI. You got Mash disappointed. She told him, Roman, you are 30 years old, brother. Just do your job. That's all you gotta do is do your job. You keep this up and I'm gonna delete that secret folder that you've been hiding from everybody. Hold on, let's be rational here. We continue our battles and finally get around into establishing our summoning circle for the chapter. Usually Da Vinci is the one that comes out and greets us when we do this, but Roman mentions that she's been doing maintenance on Sheba, so she doesn't have the time. Roman also mentions that considering the way that things are going, if we weren't here, Nero would already be dead. The servant forces would just be too much for her. We get back with Nero and she's trying to launch an expedition to Gaul. Once we make it to the camp, we see the people are just being filled with morale just from being in Nero's presence. And then we meet some of her commanders for the first time. This being the homie Spartacus and Boudica. Boudica mentioning how she used to be a queen in Britannia. And we're trying to talk to Spartacus, but the madness enhancement has this man in a chokehold. Every time we say something to him, he just ignores it and gets to rambling. What is wrong with this dude? And then Boudica confirms that he likes us. It's like, how do you know? I haven't understood him yet. Later on that day, Boudica confirms that she too should be out of the mix. She actually died around this year, and now she's been summoned right back and decided to stand alongside Nero to go against the United Empire. The irony of this is that the people that killed Boudica was the Romans in the Boudican revolt. So this is a real flip in historical events. She's basically serving as a general of someone who should be her enemy. Part of her reasoning is that she can't help but feel obligation to the underdog, who in this case would be Nero. The other half is that she supposedly feels guilty for all the carnage that she caused in revenge for what they did to her people. As I mentioned before, as a queen, when her husband lost his territory and the Romans took it, they tortured Boudica and her two daughters publicly and took all of them against their will. So at that point, the gloves are off. Boudica and her people went on a complete massacre, taking down at least 70,000 enemies, most of them being Roman, impaling them, crucifying them, hanging them, whatever. So now she feels wrong for that. Same thing goes for Spartacus. He also was captured and rebelled against the Romans. So the idea is that two people who rebelled against the Romans are now serving directly under them. But regardless of how it turned out, she says that she dislikes the United Empire more than she dislikes Nero. So that's what she's running with. And Mash, having this boxed in mind, oh, so you're really just a symbol of heroism for the people. And Boudica has to correct her, nah, that was really just revenge. They had it coming. And then she tries to fight us in order to test our skills. You know, after hearing about your past, I'd rather not fuck with you. I gotta be honest. After we beat her, she compliments us on our work, and she says Mash specifically is a very unique servant just from having her shield alone, and that she's pretty sure she could work with any heroic spirit and they'd be fine. Then she starts to realize how innocent Mash is, and out of nowhere begins to hug Mash into her chest. Okay, lady, this is starting to get weird. Saying that Mash reminds her of a little sister. One-chan Boudica in the building. She also offered Mash to take baths together and wash her back personally. Yeah, can we not do that? So we make it over to the field in Gaul, and we find out that one of the emperors is none other than Julius Caesar. It tells us that he's discontent about being summoned as a saber, considering that it wouldn't be his best class, but it'll have to do anyway. So he asks Nero for her name, and she gives her formal introduction. And then he asks Ritsuka for his name, and Ritsuka tells him, "My name is Jim." Membership. Immediately, what is your problem? And Caesar has to explain to him, what do you mean? It's Rome, baby. We got the best food, the best beverages. I can't help but be a little plump. Then he tells us, look, Nero is plump too, just in all the right places. This guy can't be serious. Well, she's not as bad as my girl Cleopatra, but she's working with something. Then he tells us if we beat him, he'll expose where the Grail is. We pull this off 2 times, in fact. The first time he was actually holding back, Madge pointing out how skilled he was with his sword. And with Caesar out of the picture, Gaul was back under Nero's control, so we're making headway. We switch over to their capital, which is where the Grail is located, and we get a scene with old reliable Professor Lev. Right off the bat, you had Lev mention that the only reason he summoned Caesar is because he had a wish for the Grail, but he's realizing that this isn't enough. Fortunately, with the power of his Grail, he can summon as many new servants as he wants. A bigger problem for him than Caesar is his other servant, Caligula, and the fact that he's been summoned in the Berserker class. Because of this, he can't communicate with him effectively, but this time he makes it clear to take down Nero without flaw. Then he summons another servant. It's your boy, Leonidas, and sends him out to take Nero down also right behind him. We head back to camp, and Nero brings up that there's been some talk about an ancient god that appeared on an island in the Mediterranean Sea, which leads to Madge asking the question, can gods actually materialize? Roman says it should be nearly impossible, and even if we had the technology to do this, he says it would be at a disadvantage to them because they be downsized in their containers. That being said, we might be able to get the lesser version of a god, which are divine spirits. This is classic fatism. Oh, this shouldn't happen in a million years. This could only happen under this circumstance. And then it literally happens in the next scene. Fatism. Nero brings up the fact that Romulus is supposed to be a divine spirit because at the end of his life, he was brought into the heavens by his father Mars. And mid-conversation, Nero just starts to space out. And this kind of goes back into her lore. It's actually one of her skills, migraine, where, as Roman mentioned before, Nero's decline towards the end of his life, you have fate playing on the stories of him becoming mentally unstable. Now, in the story, Nero hasn't gone insane yet, but it does show that she's kind of starting to go into that realm by having these random space outs. And the moment that we get back to camp, Boudica says that she's been noticing them too. She also says that she can feel little slivers of magical energy when they happen, despite the fact of Nero still being human. When she tried to confront her about it, however, Nero had no idea what she was talking about. There's even been depictions of Nero lashing out and choking Boudica in the midst of them fighting alongside each other. So we get a ship, we make our way over to this island, and lo and behold, we run into one of the Gorgon sisters, and that is Theno, a divine spirit. Though the title fits, she says that she doesn't like to be referred to as an ancient goddess. Roman tells us that since the age of gods is over, they no longer have proper authority over the land. And to that, she confirms he's right. Her power has been lost due to her vessel. She herself admitting that she's not as powerful as you would think. She says that she's not suited for combat and she can't fight on the level of her younger sister Medusa. And then Roman has to call her out. Yeah, but you're supposed to be a goddess. What's up with that? And she tells him, listen, guy with no face, I said I'm not powerful, not powerless. I will still clap you. Then she tells us that she's prepared a treasure for us in the nearby cave. So we go into the cave to check out this treasure, and it turns out that it doesn't exist. It's just a cave full of skeletons, and we get jumped. She literally did this just to be annoying. What's more is that we ended up having to face off against a phantasmal beast known as the Chimera. We come back out, and we see that Elizabeth Bathory has been summoned once again, and Tomomocat, or Tomocat, one of the many forms of the mythical Tomomo from the Tomomo 9. It's probably better if you don't ask. At that point, Caligula crashes straight into the island out of nowhere looking for Nero. The manga giving us greater context to this scene, showing Mash getting her head slammed by Caligula off the rip. It was here where Nero had another one of her episodes where she ultimately ended up slicing Caligula in the throat herself. She follows this up by piercing him through the chest with her sword, and although he can't actually speak, he does embrace her for releasing him from this summoning, something he clearly didn't want to be a part of. Once we defeat him, Nero gives us the location to their capital for our efforts, and we go back to Gaul. Once we get there, we run into Leonidas, Roman being surprised that he flat out revealed his name, something that usually is kept hidden, and says this is nothing like the former Holy Grail War. We continue to do battle, and we run into two more of her commanders, that being the assassin Jinka and the Chinese general Lubu. Currently, they're holding off the United Empire's forces the best they can. Jinka even mentioning that they took out 3 unnamed emperor servants before we got there. She's extremely stealthy, and she told Mash they should count the amount of bodies they get against each other like it's some type of game. Mash starts to pull back and tell Ritsuka, yo, has she lost it? I'm not doing that. What does she think this is? We cut back over to a scene with Lev, and he's super disappointed to see that Lubu and Jinka are still alive. Then he starts his summoning on another servant. This time around, he brings out the young version of Iskander, Alexander III, and sends him out to come get us. We cut over to their camp, and we get our look at our first pseudo-servant, that being Waver or El Molloy II, intertwined with the Chinese military strategist Zhuge Liang. And Waver is currently giving Alexander updates and breakdowns on how they should approach us. Alexander points out that he's not the same as Iskander, considering that his memories come off a bit different. He also says that it feels weird to have Waver advising him, but he doesn't know why. The old duo back at it again. We cut back over to our squad, and Jinka has gotten some intel on the United Empire. She lets us know that their capital is a parallel to Rome created from magecraft. Everything that I just mentioned is currently being written in a journal by Mash while she's standing in the middle of the field. What are you doing? Well, Roman said it'd be a good idea. Man, if you don't put that journal down and fight. In the meantime, we run into Darius III, later finding out that he appeared due to a chain summon from Alexander being put into the mix. And then we run him over. Bro, I was gonna reserve this opinion for another video, but whoever decided to give all these great characters no dialogue, you are fired. You going back to McDonald's, buddy? And then we get an update from one of Nero's soldiers. He tells us that Spartacus and Lubu have been lured away from the field. They were the ones guarding our rear. And because of this, Boudica's squad has been crushed from both sides and they've taken her captive. We meet up with the people holding her captive, this of course being Alexander and Waver. Alexander is constantly trying to push the fact that Nero should just give up and side with them. All of this conflict is due to the fact that she won't concede. Then he makes several hints to something that's revealed in FGO Arcade, and that is Nero's potential to become a part of the beast class, calling her a beast, saying what she does is sin, and even saying that she can become the devil. Every claim that he tries to throw out, she ends up denying, saying that she's the only one that's fit to be the leader of Rome. And this is what I mean when I said Sakurai had her drafts thrown out. The manga leans towards the original scenario and follows the mental strife of Nero. The reason why Nero poisoned her own mother is because her mother only saw her as a tool for advancement, and she tried to do the same to Nero. Nero survived her mother's poison attempts, but ever since she's been having these episodes. Several times throughout the story, you'll see her deceased mother pop up as an illusion, toying with Nero and playing with her mind. This often makes Nero go berserk, which as you can see is overwhelming Alexander by a lot. Realizing that he's at a disadvantage, he decides to switch gears and try to attack Mash, but even she was able to defend him by releasing her noble phantasm. With nothing else left, he decides to go all out. He pulls off to the side with his steed and prepares himself for a head-on collision. He charges in head first with his noble phantasm, Waver giving him beam support on the side to distract Mash so she doesn't interfere. He goes in for a surprise attack on Nero, and to that she responded by burning him alive with her flame sword. We defeat them both and of course save Boudica. After they fall, we find another emperor comes out, the progenitor of Rome, Mr. Rome himself, Romulus, and she finds out that he's a part of the United Empire as well. Him too making a reference to Nero's inner beast. For the time being, we drive him off. Just when we thought we finally caught a break, one of our soldiers bring us Jinka and she's been mortally wounded. We later find this to be Romulus, who managed to sneak in a surprise attack on her. And just like he mentioned in the first singularity, Ritsuka said that he wasn't gonna let this go down on his watch, so he offers one of his command spells to heal her. Then we switch over to Nero. Now before, Alexander's words didn't really hold weight, but now that she's realizing that one of the people she looked up to is a part of United, that being Romulus, she's starting to second guess herself. Maybe they are right. This leads her to having a one-on-one with Ritsuka, where he tells her that she shouldn't stray away from her path. That's exactly what they want her to do. And after many people, including Mash and Boudica, had noticed Nero was acting strange due to her Romulus encounter, all of a sudden Ritsuka had lifted her up again. With her mind back on track again, she leads us into their capital, where she rematches Romulus and takes him down for good. And once again, from the shadows emerges Lev. You really took out Romulus. It's like you're working full time just to piss me off. And Ritsuka tells him, bro, listen, we don't care for anything that you got to say right now. Just give us the grail. Oh, even you have a mouth since the last time we met. This is hilarious. He reveals that since we fixed the first singularity, he got scolded by his superiors, meaning that he had to come out to the field himself and do the cleanup. Then Roman gives us a breakdown to his scheme. The idea is that he hands off his grails to a human or a heroic spirit, preferably one that has a wish, and watch them go into madness from trying to use it, sending the entire singularity to its doom by extension. The reason that he still holds the grail in this singularity is because he never found a suitable candidate. You think you can take me just because you went up against a few servants? Now I gotta show you the skill gap. And then Lev starts to transform into the nastiest thing we've ever seen, that being a demon god pillar. His true name being Floros, Lev Liner Floros, one of the 72 demon gods. Oh my goodness, you're hideous. No wonder you're so mad at the world. After defeating him even while he's in this form, he decides to summon another servant, one that can destroy Rome faster than all the ones he summoned before. This being Altera, aka Attila the Hun, leader of the Huns and the Scourge of God. This continuity aligning more with her historical counterpart. In the past, Attila is one of the most ruthless people on this earth, in history even, having a bare minimum of 40 million bodies on his name. Lev tries to give out an order, and as soon as Lev summons her, she slices his entire body in half from top to bottom. Damn. And now it's 40,000,001. She takes the grail from Lev and immediately starts charging her phantasm and blows the entire palace open. The only reason we survived is because Mash used her phantasm and Boudica came in and rescued us with her chariot phantasm at the last minute. You even had Mash comparing her sword, the Sword of Mars, saying that it gave her the same vibes as Excalibur. And to our surprise, we realized that she's completely ignoring us and heading straight for Nero's capital. We cut her off and try to talk some sense into her, but Roman tells us since she's fusing with the grail right now, it's making her mind wither away, so the conversation is going in and out. At that point, we had no choice but to defeat her. We collect the grail, Nero telling us that she's discontent that we have to leave. Mash tells her not to worry about it too much, considering that the singularity is restored and her memories fighting against the Empire will be erased. We jump back to Chaldea and you have Da Vinci defining what the grails are for. After doing more observation, she's realized that the grail defines the laws of that dimension. It remaps them. Essentially, it flat out rewrites the rules. She also created a pocket inside of Mash's shield to hold these grails until we deliver them back, though it can only hold one at a time. Despite her knowing what happens to a singularity, Mash can't help but feel bad that she had to leave Nero behind. Then Ritsuka follows her up by saying, "Don't sweat it, it's about the journey. The important thing is she enjoyed having you there."